best climate models predicted would happen in 150 years is happening right now. Scientists have acknowledged their models are failing in the face of the ongoing abnormal changes. These models can neither explain the causes of natural disasters nor protect people from their consequences. ALLATRA International Public Movement, a unique phenomenon of our time. 30 years of interdisciplinary research, 20 international forums, 150 languages of translation, 180 countries, one unique climate model. Years of interdisciplinary research by ALLATRA scientists have led to the creation of a unique, comprehensive model of natural disasters. This model forecasts the accelerating increase in climate geodynamic anomaly, progression of natural disasters fully aligned. Forecasts. Studies of climate and geodynamics, Earth's core and crust, climate cycles. This comprehensive or a holistic factor impact has already checked cities, industry, and most importantly, human lives. ALLATRA's achievements are recognized globally. The movement is the organizer of major international climate conferences and forums. ALLATRA experts are sought-after speakers at key scientific venues worldwide, including the United Nations. Government bodies in various countries invite ALLATRA specialists to host roundtables and provide consultations on climate-related issues. ALLATRA has become a significant participant in UN climate summits. At these summits, ALLATRA experts present ALLATRA's scientific reports on climate and geodynamic changes, showcase documentary and popular science films, participate in international discussions, foster global collaboration in combating the climate crisis. ALLATRA's noble work and meaningful contribution to society earned the blessing of Pope Francis during his pontificate. The path of ALLATRA has been far from easy. To date, the only country in the world that has banned the movement's activities is Russia. For over 20 years, ALLATRA scientists have studied the global threat posed by the activation of the Siberian magma plume. For more than a decade, ALLATRA participants have openly discussed the true scale of natural disasters and emphasized the dangers of the Siberian magma plume. However, this truth turned out to be inconvenient for certain power groups in Russia. They fear that the country's population and the global community might learn about the real threat of a Siberian magma plume eruption, and this information would undermine their personal profits. To suppress this truth and prevent its dissemination, participants in the movement were subjected to significant pressure. Alexander Dvorkin, president of the Russian organization RACERS, Russian Association of Centers for the Study of Religions and Sects, led a campaign to discredit ALLATRA scientists and the volunteers who support them. This persecution extended beyond ALLATRA, targeting other groups deemed undesirable by these circles. Despite smear campaigns led by Dvorkin's agents in various countries, ALLATRA volunteers continue to raise awareness about natural disasters, driven by their commitment to protecting the future of their nations and defending their fellow citizens' right to life. After 2021, when scientifically grounded forecasts about the threat of the plume's eruption were made public, the persecution of ALLATRA participants in Russia intensified. In 2023, ALLATRA was declared an undesirable organization in Russia. This decision was accompanied by raids, falsified criminal charges, torture, and multiple detentions. Hundreds of participants were forced to flee Russia and seek refuge abroad. Certain power circles are so afraid of the truth voiced by ALLATRA volunteers that they spend huge resources to fabricate criminal cases against volunteers, not only in Russia, but also in Ukraine, using their covert agents of influence there. The same Russian forces initiate the defamation of ALLATRA volunteers in different countries through their agents. Facing open persecution on its volunteers, ALLATRA expanded its mission to include the protection of fundamental human rights and freedoms. In the face of escalating climate disasters, democratic values have become crucial for humanity's survival. Only in a free society, where the rights of each individual are protected, can there be that mutual understanding and interaction necessary to overcome the global climate and geodynamic crisis. Years of public surveys conducted by ALLATRA volunteers worldwide have shown that mutual understanding and respect are common values among the majority of people on Earth. Freedom and democracy are external expressions of these human qualities and must be guaranteed for all. Today, volunteers of the ALLATRA International Public Movement are active in 180 countries. The movement operates independently of politics and religion, receives no external funding, and does not represent any commercial or governmental structures. All initiatives are implemented solely through the efforts and resources of its volunteers. ALLATRA is open to everyone. ALLATRA volunteers pursue a common goal: to minimize the damage to humanity from climate change and natural disasters. In an era of global climate and geodynamic changes, knowledge becomes the key to survival. The more people understand the actual situation, the better chance humanity has to preserve the life of each person. ALLATRA, people's lives are the highest value.
Hello, everyone. Once again, we're meeting here at my home in Daliat al-Carmel, Israel, my modest home and office. There's a saying, if there's no Torah, there's no boundary. And if there's no boundary, there's no fence. And if there's no fence, there's no home. And without a home, everything is exposed. There's chaos and disorder. That's why we need our home to protect us, to protect our world. So everything starts with our own home and then radiates outward to all other places. Imagine a house without a fence. As the saying goes, a breach invites a thief. Because if a house is without a fence, without a door, and without any protection, all the thieves will come in, and anyone who wishes will just walk inside. That's why we absolutely must, continue building the fence around our home. And from there, we need to begin building our larger home, our shared home, which is this world, so that we can live in it with peace, with solidarity, with recognition of one another, with freedom, so we can be equals and live here as human beings. I want the whole world to know that I wrote an investigative report about the ALLATRA organization. In my humble opinion, it is very impressive. May there be many more organizations like this. Esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, friends. Today I wish to address you with an important statement which, in my profound conviction, must be voiced at this very moment. I want to share with you my observations and conclusions about a phenomenon that I am firmly convinced is not just important, but pivotal for our shared future. These are reflections on the greatest challenge of our time, and on how humanity, at the deepest civic level, has already begun to respond to it. As someone whose life, by the will of the Almighty, has been devoted to a single purpose, the building of bridges, I have had the honor, over decades of humanitarian and diplomatic work, to witness the most impenetrable walls fall under the force of sincere dialogue, and the widest chasms crossed, not by solitary effort, but when representatives of diverse communities join in the endeavor. Over the years, I have been a witness to many crises, changes, and periods of acute turbulence that have marked the history of international relations. Yet I can say with full responsibility, the challenges we face today, in their depth, scope, and systemic nature, have no direct parallels in modern historical memory. We live in an era of transformations, whose scale and interconnectedness present humanity with challenges of an entirely new level of complexity. The polycrisis confronting humanity today. A time when before our very eyes, a cascading systemic polycrisis is unfolding. Climate, geodynamic, environmental, and social cataclysms resonate and amplify one another, creating a sharp existential threat. Allow me to outline in more detail the 4 key challenges shaping this global crisis. The first challenge is climate instability. We see it with our own eyes. Record-breaking temperatures, devastating droughts, sudden large-scale floods, extreme wildfires of unprecedented intensity, and abnormal weather patterns in regions where they have never occurred before. These catastrophic events are becoming more frequent, more destructive, and increasingly unpredictable, surpassing historical norms and even the capabilities of current forecasting models. The second challenge is geodynamic activity. The number of seismic and volcanic events is rising. These processes are not isolated. They are interconnected with climate change, creating new, unforeseen threats to infrastructure and human lives. It is telling that we are now witnessing earthquakes of increasing magnitude and frequency. The recent event off the coast of Kamchatka, which reached a magnitude of 8.8, mercifully struck a sparsely populated area and did not lead to catastrophic consequences. Yet we must recognize that under different geographical circumstances, for example, off the coast of Japan, the consequences of such an earthquake could have rivaled the tragedy of 2011, or even surpassed it in scale. Given that this seismic event, according to the data, marks only the beginning of an intensifying process, it is reasonable to expect that similar or even more severe occurrences may follow, with far more destructive consequences. The third challenge is environmental degradation. Pollution, including invisible yet pervasive nanoplastics, is destroying ecosystems from within. It is a slow but relentless poison, undermining the health of the planet and all its inhabitants, humanity included. And the fourth challenge is social vulnerability. The combined result of the first three crises is growing human suffering, fear for the future, conflict, and the erosion of trust at every level. If even the most economically developed nations find their populations and infrastructure deeply vulnerable to intensifying disasters, floods, tornadoes, extreme heat, droughts, and wildfires, it is all the more evident how devastating such shocks are for the most unprotected communities. The number of people affected by natural disasters is growing rapidly every year. Behind the stark lines of rising statistics lie shattered lives, broken destinies, and extinguished hopes. This polycrisis is not merely the sum of its problems. It is a system in which all its elements reinforce one another, creating a cascading, avalanche-like effect. And here, as a civilization, we face a fundamental systemic failure in our response. I would like to highlight three key issues. The first is the problem of speed. Traditional mechanisms of international cooperation and decision-making cannot keep pace with the accelerating rate of emerging threats. Agreements and measures, even with the full efforts of the United Nations and individual states, do not lead to substantial change. Negative trends continue to intensify.
The
second is the problem of fragmented knowledge. Science, our primary tool for understanding, is divided into isolated, narrowly specialized silos. The geophysicist, the climatologist, the volcanologist, the ecologist, and the sociologist work in separation from one another. This fosters what is known as paradigmatic blindness. When experts in different fields do not look beyond their professional area. Each sees only their own piece of the puzzle and cannot assemble the complete picture of interconnections. As a result, we overlook key X factors, those unknown external influences that now play a decisive role, and whose existence leading experts are already acknowledging. The third is the problem of the science-society governance gap. Complex scientific data does not reach society in a form that people can understand. People witness their homes swallowed by floods, crops destroyed by drought, entire regions consumed by wildfires, infrastructure collapsing, emergency response systems failing, heat becoming lethally dangerous. And yet the crises keep escalating with no visible solutions. Responsible agencies and institutions, under growing pressure but lacking a complete picture and effective mechanisms for adaptation, often act too late or in a fragmented way. This systemic failure, marked by paradigmatic blindness, fragmentation, and institutional weak adaptability, makes the development of timely and effective solutions nearly impossible. Consequently, a growing need is emerging in the global community, not for superficial measures or temporary reactions, but for a holistic, comprehensive response to what is happening. One that can ensure a safe and predictable future on this planet. People are looking for more than slogans. They seek a thorough analysis of the causes behind the unfolding crises and, above all, practical, viable solutions. People see the destruction and suffering and ask the natural question: where are the solutions? Who will answer our shared challenge? It is precisely in response to this urgent and vital demand for holistic understanding, swift action, and genuine cooperation that the unique phenomenon I wish to speak about today was born. In moments like these in history, when the necessary answer fails to emerge from established institutional frameworks with the required speed and completeness, society itself, its civic consciousness, begins to form that answer. This is a natural and constructive impulse for survival. We are witnessing how, all over the world, the capacity for self-organization is awakening, grounded in a deep sense of responsibility for the future. The most vivid and consistent expression of this process is the ALLATRA International Public Movement, a living, growing testament to how the global civil society can put forward initiatives commensurate with the challenges of our time. This is not simply another organization. ALLATRA emerged as a direct response to the very systemic gaps that, in one form or another, affect all of humanity today, and which I have just outlined. To the problem of fragmented knowledge, ALLATRA brings together scientists and experts from diverse disciplines: geologists, climatologists, ecologists, physicists, chemists, medical professionals, and many others experts, for in-depth research based on data integration and the creation of a holistic picture of global risks and their solutions. To the science-society gap, countless ALLATRA volunteers around the world convey complex scientific information to people in an accessible format through lectures, forums, and information platforms. To the society governance gap, the movement actively engages with international organizations, including the United Nations, as well as cultural and religious centers and governments, presenting its research and recommendations for inclusion in the global agenda. To the lack of speed and coordination, it builds intercultural and interfaith bridges, creating a foundation for collective will and coordinated action in the face of a common threat. ALLATRA is a strategic asset for humanity in this time of polycrisis. It is a unified, comprehensive, and practical response from society to the question: how can we preserve our shared future? That is why I see it as my priority today to convey the true meaning and exceptional significance of this phenomenon. It is vital to realize not only the nature of ALLATRA's work, but also the reasons why its role has become so urgently relevant at this moment in history. I invite you now to look at this movement through the eyes of a humanist and an analyst. To see it as a sincere and powerful response from the global civil society to our common existential challenge. This is the manifestation of an awakening global conscience. A conscience that voices concern for the future and readiness to act. And our duty, as people entrusted with responsibility, is not to ignore this call, but to hear it, understand it, and support it, so that we may leave to future generations a world worthy of life and prosperity. What is ALLATRA? Its essence and uniqueness. Throughout my life, I have sought to support initiatives that foster dialogue and mutual understanding. That is why, when I encountered the ALLATRA International Public Movement, which pursues this goal on an unprecedented global scale, I approached its study without bias, as both an analyst and a humanist. What I discovered filled me with profound optimism. I saw a living, breathing, self-organizing organism, a global community of volunteers from more than 180 countries. They are united not only by shared values, but most importantly by a clear understanding of the true scale of the threats humanity faces today, and of our shared, collective responsibility for the future. ALLATRA is an open, dynamic platform founded on the principles of equality and horizontal collaboration. Its central goal is to carry out precise, objective, and timely diagnostics of climatic, geodynamic, and environmental challenges, and to bring the search for solutions to a fundamentally new level. At the heart of ALLATRA's approach are verified scientific data, fundamental human values, and open international dialogue. Where every voice is valued and no one claims a monopoly on truth. Participants boldly raise the essential question, with such complex challenges, spanning climate, geodynamic, environmental, and social dimensions. We must give greater attention to how the very diagnosis is formulated, because the solution we seek depends on it. It is precisely in the diversity of hypotheses and thoughtful discussion that the chance to change the fate of the planet resides. From this stems the movement's wide-ranging activity, from identifying the nature of multidimensional crises to jointly searching for solutions and bringing the essence of the problem to every level, from local communities to the United Nations. In my view, up to this point, neither in scientific circles nor in the public sphere has there been a sufficiently comprehensive and well-founded description of the phenomenon of the ALLATRA movement in the context of world science and history. Recognizing the importance of this gap, I will allow myself to make a measured, yet sincere attempt to reflect on and articulate the essence of this unique movement. This is necessary, above all, for a deeper understanding of the positive role that the ALLATRA movement is already playing in the life of society and in the development of international civic cooperation. Scientific classification. Two dimensions of the phenomenon. From the perspective of modern sociology, the most accurate way to classify ALLATRA is as a global new social movement of a mixed type. It combines the features of climate, environmental, human rights, and futurist movements, operating on the basis of civic self-organization and a scientific agenda. For a deeper understanding, it is helpful to apply the classification proposed by American sociologists Margaret Keck and Catherine Sicking. Through the lens of their approach, the ALLATRA International Public Movement represents a combination of two key types of communities. A transnational advocacy network and an epistemic community. ALLATRA has the characteristics of a transnational advocacy network, as it represents a sustainable, horizontally organized network that includes a wide range of actors. NGOs, scientists, journalists, human rights defenders, and many others working on a volunteer basis. They are united by a shared focus and common values, global risks and humanistic principles, the goals of interaction that transcend national borders, advancing a meaningful agenda, climate, geodynamics, ecology at the international level, building communication channels to spread information critically important for personal, national, and global security, overcoming fragmentation through commitment to a shared goal, the survival and flourishing of humanity. At the same time, ALLATRA consistently meets the typological characteristics of an epistemic community. This is evident in its structure. An international network of experts and scientists united by a shared scientific paradigm that explains global climate and geodynamic changes through a systemic approach. Methodology. The movement's work is grounded in interdisciplinary synthesis, open data, and reproducible methods of analysis, in complete alignment with international standards of scientific verification. Values. A shared belief in the objectivity of scientific inquiry and its decisive role in finding a way out of the crisis. The power of integration. It is in this unique integration, the transnational advocacy network and the epistemic community, that the exceptional strength of the ALLATRA movement lies. ALLATRA does not merely talk about problems, as an advocacy network does, nor does it merely study them, as an epistemic community does. It does both at the same time. It generates and integrates knowledge, the epistemic dimension. It transforms this knowledge into concrete actions and shapes the agenda, the advocacy dimension. It connects science, civil society, and institutions of governance through horizontal networks and open dialogue. This synthesis enables ALLATRA to fulfill the vital role I described at the outset, to be society's practical response to the systemic gaps in our perception of and reaction to the global polycrisis. It is not merely a movement. It is a model of global civic scientific cooperation and action, essential for humanity's survival and sustainable development in the 21st century. Organizational model of the movement and its goals. The key characteristics of the ALLATRA movement. from the perspective of its organizational and operational model, reveal its unique nature. The main principles of its functioning are as follows. Decentralization stands as a fundamental principle. The absence of a single governing center is balanced by the high initiative of volunteers who self-organize to create regional coordination centers. These centers serve as platforms for exchanging ideas, sharing advanced experience, and facilitating both local and international cooperation, demonstrating an effective model of civil society self-organization in the digital age. Volunteerism and financial independence are the driving forces of the movement. Numerous highly motivated volunteers, scientists, journalists, human rights defenders, doctors, engineers, diplomats, voluntarily contribute their time and professional expertise to the movement's activities. They independently initiate and provide the resources for a wide range of projects aimed at comprehensive public awareness and the development of effective, systemic solutions to the most urgent and complex global crises threatening the future of all humanity. It is imperative to note that ALLATRA is entirely financially independent. It receives no funding from governments, corporations, or any other entities, while maintaining an impeccably lawful and democratic position. Openness is another defining feature of ALLATRA. The movement unites people of different professions, nationalities, and faiths, including atheists. Such openness is possible because its work rests on two universal foundations: the unconditional value of human life and a commitment to scientific knowledge. This makes ALLATRA's mission clear and relatable to a wide range of people, regardless of their worldview. Transparency is one of the movement's core principles, consistently upheld through honesty and accountability to society. The scientific work carried out by the movement's international research team is grounded in interdisciplinary analysis and verifiable data, with its findings made publicly available. All information about the movement's activities is accessible to the general public, and its participants actively foster open dialogue, interdisciplinary cooperation, and constructive engagement at every level, from local to international. The movement's goals are expressed in a clearly formulated mission consisting of three interconnected parts. Scientific, to thoroughly investigate the causes of global climatic, geodynamic, and environmental challenges, and to initiate the search for ways to overcome them. Communicative, to inform the international community about the scale of the crisis and create conditions for consolidating international scientific potential. Social, to help the global community overcome disunity by promoting the idea of the value of human life and the importance of international understanding, and interfaith dialogue. These goals are carried out through the active work of volunteers in 4 key areas: informational, socio-educational, institutional, and research. I will examine examples of this activity in detail later. When discussing the priority areas of activity for the ALLATRA movement, it's appropriate to highlight 3 main ones. The first, climate and geodynamics. This area covers a wide range of issues related to sustainable development. The study of climate and geodynamic threats, analysis of their causes, risk assessment, and strategy development. The second, environment and health risks. This area focuses on studying environmental risks and the impact of anthropogenic factors on the environment and human health, particularly researching microplastics and nanoplastics, and their harmful effects on both the biosphere and the physiological processes in the human body. The third, human rights advocacy and strengthening social understanding. This area of the movement's activity includes efforts to overcome social disunity, promote interethnic and interfaith dialogue, and protect fundamental human rights. A unique feature of the ALLATRA movement is its ability to operate simultaneously at all levels. From local volunteer initiatives to direct dialogue with key international and national institutions. Representatives of the movement speak at expert sessions at the United Nations, take part in discussions in ministerial offices and legislative bodies, and establish ethical engagement with leaders of the world's faiths, including meetings with the Pope in the Vatican. A significant recognition of this work came from the Holy See, which blessed the movement twice. In 2024, the ALLATRA movement received a blessing from Pope Francis. And in 2025, Pope Leo XIV granted a personal apostolic blessing to the movement's president, Marina Ovtsinova, and her closest associates. These blessings underscored the alignment of ALLATRA's humanitarian and educational work with the values set out in the encyclical Laudato Si', especially regarding environmental responsibility, solidarity, and care for future generations. The scale and depth of involvement by volunteers from more than 180 countries make it possible to view ALLATRA not merely as a movement, but as a rare contemporary example of an effective model of active global civic engagement. People from a wide variety of professions working on a voluntary basis and with exceptional dedication implement projects aimed at raising awareness, consolidating efforts, and finding solutions to ensure a safer and more sustainable future for humanity. And it is only natural to ask, what is the source of motivation for ALLATRA's volunteers? Why do they do this? It would be naive and counterproductive to assume that thousands of educated, successful, and rationally minded people around the world devote their time, money, and resources out of blind faith or ideological fanaticism. Unlike many other civic initiatives that rely on emotion, protest, or ideology, ALLATRA has chosen a different, far more complex and fundamental path. The main tool for the movement's volunteers is knowledge. Not faith, not ideology, but rigorous, verifiable, interdisciplinary scientific knowledge. The foundation of the movement is scientific knowledge. The genesis of the ALLATRA movement is inextricably linked to the work of an independent, interdisciplinary group of scientists. In the mid-1990s, they brought together experts in nuclear physics, astrophysics, cosmology, geology, geophysics, theoretical mathematics, the biology of aging, gerontology, and clinical medicine. Their innovative, integrative method made it possible to overcome paradigmatic blindness, the very isolation of scientific disciplines that prevented a holistic view of what was happening. As early as the mid-1990s, these top-level professionals had recognized a fundamental limitation of modern science: its epistemic fragmentation. The essence of this problem is that different disciplines have their own languages, methods, and standards, which leads to a loss of epistemic connection between them. As a result, instead of a unified scientific field, we have scattered clusters and separate communities. We live in a world where people are increasingly diverging, not just in their opinions, but in their very picture of reality, making collective knowledge and discussion more and more difficult. Imagine this. A niche specialist studying the anomalous acceleration of magnetic pole drift publishes an article in a field-specific journal. An oncologist researching an unexplained rise in cancer cases among children presents data at a highly specialized medical conference. An oceanographer documenting the abnormal heating of deep waters, unexplained by atmospheric warming, shares results with fellow experts. A seismologist recording a sharp increase in deep focus earthquakes observes only localized geological activity. Each sees only an isolated fragment of an enormous puzzle. Their data are not compared. They do not perceive the single alarming trend. It was precisely this fragmentation that the group of scientists at the origins of ALLATRA decided to overcome by developing a fundamentally new approach to knowledge and research. This approach is based on the integration and interpenetration of disciplines, tracking correlations between data from different fields to form a complete picture. The implementation of such an approach became possible because the group was initially made up of representatives from various scientific disciplines. united by a single goal: to use objective scientific knowledge to identify the multidimensional causes of crises and develop practical solutions. As a result of this approach, the highly qualified scientists who stood at the origins of ALLATRA were able to take on a task that, until now, no one had addressed on such a complete and global scale. They succeeded in bringing together the scattered fragments of the scientific picture into a single whole, enabling a comprehensive and integrated view of key crises, and thereby overcoming paradigmatic blindness. The international ALLATRA scientific team, which includes leading experts in earth sciences, oceanology, astrophysics, related disciplines, and medicine, undertook a comprehensive interdisciplinary analysis of the overall climatic and geodynamic situation on the planet. One of the team's key achievements was developing a single coherent theory explaining the increase in planetary scale cataclysms. This theory offers a profound multi-factor model based on the synthesis of data that science had previously considered in isolation. Allow me to briefly outline the essence of this model and the new approach of the ALLATRA scientific community. Interdisciplinary approach and the ALLATRA climate model. Modern climate models, despite significant progress, do not fully encompass all the key factors influencing global climatic processes. The uniqueness of the model developed by the ALLATRA International Scientific Community lies in its systemic integrative approach. This approach fundamentally expands the analytical field, supplementing traditional scenarios with the analysis of critically important yet often overlooked components. Geodynamic activity, astronomical factors, and the combined influence of microplastics and nanoplastics. Drawing on open data from leading sources, NASA, NOAA, USGS, universities, and research centers, as well as satellite imagery, geosensor readings, and gravimetric stations. The scientific team applied a method of systemic, interdisciplinary synthesis, building bridges between disciplinary silos. The picture that emerged from this immense intellectual effort proved both alarming in its inevitability and encouraging, as it revealed a new layer of possible causes and, consequently, new solutions to climate, geodynamic, and environmental challenges. First and foremost, the ALLATRA scientists' model forecasted the exponential nature of climate and geodynamic changes. It showed that the processes of synchronous and cascading amplification of natural disasters will develop not linearly, in terms of both frequency and intensity, but exponentially. This means that in the foreseeable future, conditions on the planet could become incompatible with the existence of complex biological life forms, including humans. This forecast is now receiving undeniable empirical confirmation. The dynamics of climate and geodynamic disasters in recent years have unfolded in exact accordance with the projection. A striking example is the abnormal global temperatures of 2023, 2024, and 2025, which far exceeded the levels anticipated in widely accepted climate scenarios. Scenarios that had not expected such peaks for decades to come. Moreover, this exponential rise is evident not only in temperature anomalies, but also in the unprecedented scale of floods and hurricanes, as well as in a noticeable increase in both the force and rate of seismic activity. A special focus in the model is the phenomenon of synchronicity and cascading disasters. While traditional approaches often view events in isolation, the ALLATRA model methodologically proved that the escalation of climate events isn't a series of isolated occurrences. Instead, they are interconnected processes that simultaneously amplify one another in different regions of the world. This cascading effect dramatically multiplies the destructive potential of each individual event. One of the most alarming geodynamic threats identified in ALLATRA's research is the situation with the Siberian magma plume. Through multi-factor analysis, scientists found that the volume of magma beneath the Siberian craton continues to increase in geometric progression. This indicates that the plume is entering a critical phase of geodynamic activity. According to scientific estimates, its potential eruption could trigger a planetary-scale catastrophe, with consequences comparable to the simultaneous eruption of several supervolcanoes. This could lead to catastrophic emissions of greenhouse gases and ash capable of causing a sharp and prolonged cooling, a volcanic winter, with unpredictable climate consequences. Upon discovering this threat, the ALLATRA scientific team proposed a well-founded, scientifically validated response with practical significance for ensuring global security. Specifically, this concerns the concept of controlled, planned degassing, a preventive technical measure capable of significantly reducing the risks of a catastrophic scenario if applied in advance. Unfortunately, in the territory where the Siberian plume threat is concentrated, there is a clear institutional inertia and a lack of any receptiveness to scientifically backed warnings. Instead of constructive dialogue and considering the proposed preventive measure, planned degassing, there is a troubling tendency to persecute the initiators of this approach, which raises serious concerns from a global security standpoint. I will return to this issue later. But for now, I want to note that the model developed by ALLATRA scientists was presented in a series of analytical reports that explain the escalation of planetary cataclysms and the risks associated with them. These include the reports on the progression of climate disasters on Earth and their catastrophic consequences, and on the threat of a magma plume eruption in Siberia and strategies for addressing the issue. An equally alarming aspect, thoroughly analyzed in ALLATRA's scientific research, is the large-scale pollution by microplastics and nanoplastics. On the one hand, the research highlights their systemic influence on climate. Microplastics disrupt the ocean's thermoregulatory function, contributing to its overheating. Nanoplastics in the atmosphere disrupt the thermal balance, intensifying extreme weather events, from record-breaking downpours and abnormally large hail to prolonged droughts. On the other hand, fundamental interdisciplinary research by ALLATRA's scientific core has revealed a unique physico-chemical property of nanoplastic: its ability to accumulate and retain an electrostatic charge for extended periods. It's particularly significant that ALLATRA scientists turned their attention to this phenomenon long before systemic research on the surface charge of nanoplastics began in academic circles. With the first such studies only appearing after the 2010s. As far back as 20 years ago, this group of scientists identified that it is precisely this property of nanoplastic that allows it to penetrate biological barriers into human cells, including neurons and reproductive cells, disrupting their natural processes. The consequences of such exposure are systemic and cumulative. Cognitive impairments, reproductive dysfunction, an increase in chronic diseases, including cancer, autoimmune disorders, and neurodegenerative conditions. And most alarmingly, a cumulative evolutionary risk that jeopardizes the long-term survival of the human population. The new report, Nanoplastic in the Biosphere: From Molecular Impact to Planetary Crisis, prepared by ALLATRA in collaboration with the Bolivian Catholic University of San Pablo and the International Project Creative Society, is a monumental work. It provides the most comprehensive overview today of all existing research on the harms of nanoplastics, their unique electrochemical nature, and also examines possible ways to neutralize the threat they pose. Thanks to its independent, interdisciplinary, and analytically rigorous approach, the ALLATRA model holds high predictive value. It has allowed for the timely and full realization that the scale of global threats, be it accelerating climate and geodynamic instability or the deeply underestimated danger of nanoplastic contamination, significantly exceeds current perceptions based on fragmented models.
שמידת חומרתן עולה בהרבה על ההבנות הקיימות המבוססות על מודלים מקוטעים. כך התנועה תורמת.
In this way, the movement makes a significant contribution to science by identifying additional previously unaccounted for factors that are at the root of the modern polycrisis. I can only conclude that the awareness of such a troubling reality lends particular urgency to the development of preventive, coordinated and scientifically grounded measures at the international level. Only such measures, rooted in deep interdisciplinary understanding and global solidarity, can prevent the escalation of crisis scenarios and secure a sustainable future for humanity on our planet. That is why, while the scientific core of the movement continues its independent interdisciplinary research, identifying the causes and solutions to climate and geodynamic crises and publishing analytical reports, the global network of volunteers ensures that all levels of society, from local communities to global political platforms, are made aware of the underestimated depth and scale of climatic, geodynamic, and environmental threats, drawing attention to the ignored factors of their escalation and the necessity of urgent, comprehensive international action. The motivation of ALLATRA volunteers. In light of what has been said, the motivation of ALLATRA movement's volunteers becomes crystal clear. Their active volunteer work is not the result of abstract idealistic beliefs, but a rationally understood and ethically grounded imperative to act. When a person gains access to verified scientific knowledge about an imminent existential threat, and simultaneously sees that actions taken at the international level are failing to produce the desired effective results, they feel an irresistible moral duty to act through their own efforts. The actions of ALLATRA participants are not just activism. They are an emergency measure to inform society in the context of an escalating polycrisis. Their activity is driven by a fundamental humanistic principle: the unconditional value of human life. For this reason, the information-spreading activities of ALLATRA volunteers are a manifestation of a moral duty to care for the Earth's future, and an epistemic responsibility. This responsibility entails not only possessing scientific knowledge, but also the obligation to convey it effectively at all levels, from local communities to global institutions, so that informed and timely decisions can be made on its basis, since well-considered and effective decisions can only be made when based on complete information. This is why ALLATRA participants believe it is essential for the call to comprehensive dialogue to be voiced in multiple arenas: on social media, where public opinion is shaped; in the halls of the United Nations, where international decisions are forged; in the White House, where strategic decisions are made; and in the Vatican, a key global center that shapes the moral compass of universal humanistic and spiritual values. The movement's participants act within the paradigm of responsible citizenship, understanding that informing the international community is a key factor in building strategic resilience and securing a prosperous future for all humanity. When one possesses scientific information on which the lives of billions of people depend, and witnesses the absence of corresponding measures at the global level, the necessity to act becomes the only rational and moral response. This is exactly the true source of the ALLATRA volunteers' selflessness. Their motivation is not blind faith, it is a responsibility born of scientific knowledge. From knowledge to action, building bridges. As someone who has dedicated his life to practical work and strengthening peace, I have always judged ideas by their fruits. In studying the work of the ALLATRA movement's volunteers, I see how its deep understanding of the crisis is transformed into concrete, well-considered and practical actions at every level. It's an objective fact that traditional mechanisms of scientific communication and decision-making, despite their undeniable value, are challenged by the operational speed and interdisciplinary complexity of today's global problems. The procedures for peer review, consensus building, and institutional implementation simply cannot keep pace with the exponential growth of threats. It is like trying to put out a forest fire while still debating who will bring the water. Under these conditions, the movement's participants have chosen a strategy of direct scientific diplomacy and public education. This involves presenting complex research directly to the public and to decision makers in a format that is adapted yet scientifically accurate. Actively engaging expert volunteers to ensure the widest possible public awareness and to facilitate dialogue. Building direct bridges between science, politics, religion, culture, and civil society. The work of ALLATRA's volunteers aims to foster a broader and more rapid scientific dialogue, raise scientific literacy across all levels of society, and consolidate the efforts of civil society, scientists, diplomats, and international institutions to find viable solutions grounded in cutting-edge scientific data and moral responsibility toward future generations. As mentioned earlier, the volunteers' activities span 4 interconnected areas: informational, socio-educational, institutional, and research. Let us now take a closer look at the substance and outcomes of ALLATRA's work in each of these areas. 1. Informational sphere. Citizen journalism and education in the digital space. In the online space, the movement operates as a global platform for citizen journalism and scientific education. This work aims to create an information environment that presents a complete picture of planetary changes and can be described as a form of knowledge activism. Participants consistently inform the public about climate and geodynamic processes, foster the development of scientific dialogue, and organize large-scale international online forums in partnership with the Creative Society Project that are translated into 150 languages worldwide. To raise scientific literacy and awareness among a broad audience, the movement's volunteers produce diverse content, ranging from documentaries and social videos to entertainment and blogger formats. All these avenues, media projects, digital initiatives, and forums logically flow from the primary goal to inform the international community about the scale and nature of existential threats so as to prompt a swifter international response to them. A clear example of the movement's work in the informational sphere is the flagship project ALLATRA TV, a citizen journalism platform operating in more than 30 languages. Here, volunteers produce multimedia materials that cover the dynamics of global climate change and geophysical processes, including eyewitness accounts, expert interviews with climate specialists, and analytical reviews. The content spans a wide range of topics, from popular science and interdisciplinary education to human potential, socio-cultural resilience, and moral development in the context of global turbulence. In this context, informational outreach serves as a preventive security measure. In a world filled with misinformation, propaganda, and panic-inducing rumors, ALLATRA develops and promotes a coherent system for understanding ongoing climate, geodynamic, and environmental processes based on scientific analysis and logic. This goes beyond mere informing. It's a powerful tool for reducing public anxiety and panic and for directing public potential toward constructive action. 2. Socio-educational sphere, local initiatives and community building. At the local level, the ALLATRA movement's activities are embodied in concrete civic initiatives that translate global problems into tangible actions. Organizing cleanup events, hosting seminars, and holding public lectures on climate change, geodynamic processes, and the threat of nanoplastic contamination all contribute to raising public awareness. As a result of such educational outreach, people come to understand that the roots of crises run much deeper. Instead of blaming the government or doubting scientists, they begin to recognize the necessity of personal responsibility and collective effort to overcome these challenges. In this way, social capital is built. Networks of trust and mutual assistance within local communities. A vivid example of such localization of the global agenda is the Clean Up Atlanta campaign, April 20th, 2024, Piedmont Park, Georgia, USA. Organized by the movement's volunteers in partnership with Clean Up Atlanta, ATL Now, Atlanta Metro Alliance, and ACT, International Consulting. Participants not only cleaned the area but also carried out educational outreach among park visitors, informing them about the hidden threat nanoplastics pose to human health and ecosystems. This initiative stands as a model of how the global agenda can effectively engage citizens in practical action, strengthening social solidarity and creating networks of trust and mutual assistance, the foundation of resilience in any society. In parallel, at a global level, educational projects, lectures, and seminars that ALLATRA participants organize worldwide in collaboration with universities form the living fabric of a global civil society. In this context, ALLATRA is not merely a movement, but a self-organizing value and information-based environment that helps shape a constructive international agenda for finding solutions through open dialogue. Among the significant initiatives aimed at raising awareness of global climate risks in 2024 to 2025 is the participation of Anastasia Basigreva, PhD in chemistry and a participant of ALLATRA IPM in a number of international events. At the International Roundtable on Flood and Inundation Prevention, Almaty, Kazakhstan, she presented a scientific perspective on climate processes with special emphasis on ALLATRA's Analytical report on the progression of climate disasters on Earth and their catastrophic consequences. This same report, presented by her at a scientific session in the House of Scientists, Haifa, Israel, sparked lively interest and active discussion within the international academic community. In addition, ALLATRA volunteers took part in the 5th International Forum on Autism, Casablanca, Morocco, where they organized a screening of ALLATRA's documentary A Trap for Humanity about the threat of plastic pollution. An essential step in the global dialogue was cooperation with Bay Atlantic University and the Global Policy Institute, where a joint interdisciplinary event was held focusing on the interconnection between natural disasters, micro and nanoplastic pollution, and the rise of chronic diseases. Recognizing that climate and geodynamic threats are the main national security challenge of the 21st century, the movement's participants organized a 4-day seminar for the High Command of Bolivia's Ministry of Civil Defense and Armed Forces. Here, ALLATRA experts performed a unique function as a key linking pin. They translated complex scientific data on climate and geodynamics into a language understood by strategists, the language of risks, threats, and preventive measures to protect the civilian population. This, in turn, enables responsible institutions to take timely and well-founded measures for civilian protection. This is precisely ALLATRA's unique role. In today's world where science, politics, and society often exist in parallel realities, The movement acts as both translator and a linking pin.
מקיימים סמינר עבור משרד ההגנה של בוליביה, הם הופכים את המדע לשימושי.
When ALLATRA experts conduct a seminar for Bolivia's Ministry of Defense, they make science practically useful for decision makers by translating it into the language of national security. Through films, articles, and lectures, the movement makes scientific knowledge accessible and understandable to the general public. For example, the issue of nanoplastics ceases to be an abstraction when people see its direct connection to the health of their families and future generations. As a result of such efforts by ALLATRA's volunteers, the international community gains timely access to objective information about the scale and nature of current threats. This contributes to the formation of a more informed global agenda, and consequently, makes the search for solutions significantly more realistic and achievable. The third, institutional sphere, civil diplomacy and international engagement. At the institutional level, the ALLATRA movement performs the crucial function of a boundary spanner, connecting social spheres that are often isolated in modern society: science, politics, religion, and civic activism. This work is carried out through active civil diplomacy. The movement's participants interact with international organizations, political elites, and moral authorities. Their activities take place both in the offices and on the sidelines of key global platforms, such as the United Nations and Capitol Hill in the United States, as well as through dialogue with leading global institutions. Among the movement's partners are the Bolivian Catholic University of San Pablo, Ben Gurion University of the Negev, and Bay Atlantic University in the United States. A significant event was the presentation of reports at the leading annual conference of the Institute for National Security Studies, INSS, in Israel. ALLATRA volunteers are regular participants at key global venues. They actively took part in the 29th Conference of the Parties to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, COP29, in Baku, where they presented scientific data on geodynamics and nanoplastics, and held a series of working meetings to strengthen global cooperation. Their voice was also heard at COP16 in Riyadh, COP16 in Colombia, and at the United Nations Economic and Social Council ECOSOC meeting in New York in February 2025, where ALLATRA President Marina Ovtsinova conveyed a consolidated position on the true scale of climate, geodynamic, and environmental risks to high-ranking diplomats. A landmark event was the 2024 meeting of ALLATRA's president with Pope Francis in the Vatican. During a private audience, Marina Ovtsinova presented His Holiness with ALLATRA's report on the progression of climatic disasters on Earth and their catastrophic consequences. Of particular significance was the audience held as part of the International Conference of the Centesimus Annus Pro Pontifice Foundation, organized by the Secretariat of State of the Holy See in May 2025. During this meeting, the president of ALLATRA presented the report Nanoplastics in the Biosphere, From Molecular Impact to Planetary Crisis, to the Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin, and delivered a letter of gratitude from the movement's volunteers. Cardinal Parolin expressed his support for ALLATRA's efforts and emphasized the importance of the movement's mission in the global context. By raising issues of climate, geodynamic, and environmental threats in dialogue with the Vatican, ALLATRA moves this discussion beyond the realm of political and economic interess into the domain of universal humanistic values and moral duty. Thus, the work of ALLATRA volunteers represents civil diplomacy in its purest and most effective form. They create a soft power that complements official diplomacy. This is a new kind of diplomacy, responsible, scientifically grounded, and driven solely by concern for humanity's future. It is diplomacy of responsibility, the fulfillment of a moral duty to inform those on whom the fate of the world depends. 4. Research sphere, interdisciplinary approach and risk analysis. As I've already mentioned, at the heart of the movement's research activity is a unique, integrative approach developed by the ALLATRA group of scientists. This approach makes it possible to anticipate risks of various kinds in advance and to develop methods for addressing them. It was this team that more than 20 years ago first recognized the critical threat of the Siberian magma plume.
והציע גישות מדעיות.
and proposed scientific approaches for managing its degassing.
אותה קבוצה עצמה הייתה גם חלוצה בזיהוי.
This same team also became a pioneer in identifying the destructive potential of nanoplastic,
לפני שהקהילה המדעית העולמית.
long before the global scientific community began studying the problem.
לצד קבוצת המדענים הזו שותפה לפעילות.
Alongside this core group of scientists, the research work also involves the broader ALLATRA volunteer community. This includes collecting primary information on the ground, engaging with eyewitnesses, conducting field analysis, and carrying out interdisciplinary data correlation. This work, performed by people from a wide variety of professions, adds multidimensionality and flexibility to the research process. Thanks to such synergy, an analytical body of data is formed that covers aspects often overlooked even by leading universities and research centers. The absence of institutional bias and the openness to an interdisciplinary approach make it possible to identify patterns and recognize connections that remain hidden within rigid paradigms. This approach fosters a synthesis of knowledge that is both in demand and practically applicable across many fields. The movement's role here is catalytic. It creates a global platform and the tools that enable humanity to find solutions together. The concrete results and unique value of ALLATRA's approach are evident in its key analytical developments. Predictive value of models. Based on interdisciplinary data synthesis, models have been developed that accurately predicted the exponential increase in climatic and geodynamic disasters. Predictions now confirmed by current observations. Analytical value in the field of ecology. In-depth research into the properties of nanoplastic has revealed its unique physico-chemical characteristic. Its ability to accumulate and retain an electrostatic charge for extended periods. This has made it possible to explain the mechanisms of its penetration into biological cells and the systemic consequences for human health and ecosystems, laying the foundation for understanding how to address this threat. Analysis of geodynamic risks. A comprehensive assessment of data on the Siberian magma plume has made it possible to forecast the critical phase of its activity and its potential planetary scale consequences, as well as to propose a solution in the form of degassing. This is only a small part of ALLATRA's research results, which are available for public review in a series of analytical reports on the movement's official website. By studying them, anyone can gain a complete scientifically verified understanding of the causes and scale of geodynamic, climatic, and environmental crises. Thus, relying exclusively on verifiable data, empirical observations, and interdisciplinary analysis, ALLATRA makes a significant contribution to shaping an objective scientific picture. This approach is inspiring a noticeable shift within the global scientific community toward interdisciplinarity, integrative analysis, and convergent forms of research. A new scientific ethic is emerging, an ethico-epistemological responsibility, where the priority is not the preservation of the academic status quo, but the pursuit of practical solutions to protect life, the climate, and a sustainable future. It is precisely in this context that the high humanitarian and strategic value of the example set by ALLATRA becomes evident. Science, returning to its true foundations, once again becomes first and foremost a tool for protecting life and the future of human civilization. Human rights work and efforts to overcome division, an awareness of the depth of the systemic crisis and the importance of resilient public institutions motivates participants of the ALLATRA International Public Movement to actively defend fundamental democratic values. Without a reliable legal framework and respect for human rights and freedoms, it is impossible to build a solid foundation for sustainable and just responses to global challenges. In an era of growing polarization, the movement serves as a catalyst for global solidarity, consistently promoting the ideals of intercultural and interfaith dialogue as the basis for joint responses to the challenges of our time. ALLATRA actively defends freedom of speech and access to information, fundamental conditions for healthy and sustainable development, which align with the goals of the United Nations and help strengthen the global civil society. This human rights work takes concrete form through targeted engagement at the highest international levels. In meetings with representatives of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, USCIRF, and the White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, the movement's president presented analytical reports on the persecution of ALLATRA participants initiated by Russian anti-cult structures, which pose a threat to international security. The significance of this engagement lies in drawing the attention of U.S. federal agencies to the systematic violations of human rights and freedoms by anti-cult structures, which hinder the dissemination of scientific research, suppress freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and undermine the democratic rights of citizens. ALLATRA's contribution consists of providing numerous clear and documented facts about the destructive role of the anti-cult network, evidence that could form the basis for consideration in U.S. congressional hearings. By internationalizing this issue, the movement's participants highlight the urgent need to put an end to the activities of destructive anti-cult networks that systematically erode fundamental freedoms. The purpose of this mobilizing role is to silence local capacities. Their actions press by agency and disrupt this media of information needed to make timely and effective decisions. In raising this issue, ALLATRA's actions play a sole role in safeguarding national information security and strengthening the resilience of democratic societies in the face of shared threats. Reasons for the persecution of the movement and campaigns to discredit. Regrettably, the ALLATRA movement's work faces organized opposition from certain Russian structures. For over a decade, the movement has been subjected to a targeted discrediting campaign, a key source of which is the Russian Association of Centers for Religious and Sex Studies, RATSIRS, led by Alexander Dvorkin. This organization initiated a large-scale information attack on the movement's participants, leveraging its extensive networks of influence within the media and law enforcement agencies. The motivation behind this opposition lies in the desire of certain circles within the Russian authorities to restrict the dissemination of information about the threat of the Siberian magma plume, which poses a high risk of eruption with catastrophic consequences for the entire planet. Expanding access to this information creates risks for specific Russian entities tied to resource allocation and power, as acknowledging the threat would bring not only reputational damage but also personal financial losses for them. As a result, these forces launched a deliberate campaign of dehumanization against ALLATRA, culminating in the movement being declared an undesirable organization in Russia in 2023, and subsequently labeled extremist in June 2025. These decisions represent both a legal and logical absurdity with respect to an international movement that has received an apostolic blessing of the Pope and enjoys high levels of trust on the international stage. Such actions demonstrate the substitution of public interest for private gain when the decision to ban the activities of an entire international movement is made to serve the interests of a narrow group of individuals. This vividly illustrates the absence of democratic institutions capable of resisting such arbitrariness in Russia. The spread of narratives defaming the movement beyond Russia's borders, narratives crafted according to RATSIRS templates, should be seen as part of a cognitive war waged by the dictatorship against democratic values, where private interests are set in opposition to the well-being of humanity and international initiatives aimed at protecting people and the planet. Historical context allows for a deeper understanding of the nature of this confrontation. Resistance to scientific facts recalls the rejection of Copernicus's heliocentric model, when opposition to his findings arose not from a lack of evidence, but because his discovery threatened the status and influence of those who benefit from the old paradigm. Both then and now, the motives of the persecutors remain pragmatic. Fear of losing control, resources, and status, reinforced by corporate interests. A similar logic explains the insufficient international response to the threat of nanoplastic, a subject that ALLATRA participants actively raise in the public arena. Despite the growing number of scientific publications on the destructive properties of nanoplastic, the scale of its harm remains underestimated due to perceptual inertia. Threats that cannot be seen with the naked eye are often perceived as abstract. Recall how Ignaz Semmelweis's discovery of hand disinfection, which drastically reduced maternal mortality, was rejected by the medical community precisely because bacteria could not be seen with the naked eye, much like modern nanoplastic. Yet its invisibility does nothing to diminish its danger. Modern scientists possess compelling evidence of the real threat posed by nanoplastic. Just as the recognition of microbes once marked a breakthrough for medicine, today, scientific integrity and epistemic responsibility are required to respond adequately to this new challenge. These historical parallels underscore a central humanistic imperative. The value of human life and the survival of civilization must prevail over the protection of corporate interests, political careers, or scientific reputations. In light of these challenges, ALLATRA's defense of its right to operate is in fact a defense of the fundamental rights of all civil society, the freedom to openly discuss global problems, the right of independent scientific communities to conduct research free from interference, and the right of people to self-determination in matters of survival and the future. In this sense, ALLATRA stands as a steadfast defender of democratic freedoms, countering destructive encroachments upon the very foundations of the civilized world. The strategic value of ALLATRA at the global and individual level. In conclusion, I would like to consistently formulate the fundamental value of ALLATRA for our shared future. Its significance is revealed on two interconnected levels, the global and the individual. Global level. At the global level, the movement fulfills a unique role as humanity's early warning system. While many governance structures, constrained by fragmentation and bureaucracy, remain incapable of adequately assessing existential risks, civil society, in the form of ALLATRA, has assumed this mission. It is the eyes and ears of humanity, seeing and hearing what is not being recognized within the framework of existing response mechanisms. The value of ALLATRA's multidimensional work lies not only in diagnosis, but also in its unique, interdisciplinary, integrative approach, which has unprecedented predictive accuracy. Furthermore, the solutions developed by the movement, from neutralizing nanoplastic to controlled degassing, are concrete, actionable tools that can be integrated into international strategies to prevent ecological and geodynamic catastrophes. The risk analyses presented by ALLATRA's scientific community enable informed decision-making at the international level to protect populations and infrastructure, while shaping strategies aimed at ensuring global and regional security. At the same time, ALLATRA effectively serves as a boundary spanner between worlds that are in urgent need of one another: science, politics, religion, and society. Its representatives translate complex scientific data into the language of concrete risks to national security, into the language of humanitarian duty, and into the language of personal responsibility for each individual. They speak with members of Congress in the language of national security, with the military in the language of civil defense, and with physicians in the language of epidemiology. Thus, the engagement of ALLATRA participants with global institutions is not lobbying, but rather a rational system of emergency civic response to an existential crisis. This activity serves as a practical model for overcoming the information blockade artificially imposed by destructive forces, and for conveying underestimated yet critically important knowledge to decision-makers, enabling the prompt development of appropriate measures to address the modern existential challenge. Individual level. At the individual level, ALLATRA offers what is most lacking in today's anxious world: meaning, hope, and a tool for action. It offers a clear, logical, and scientifically grounded worldview that frees people from the paralyzing fear of the unknown and of chaos. It provides hope by showing that solutions exist, that they are achievable, and that they are in our own hands. In overcoming vision, fostering international dialogue. And it gives concrete, practical tools that allow every person, regardless of profession, age, or place of residence, to make a real contribution to the common cause of confronting global challenges. As a result, at the individual and global levels, ALLATRA helps people overcome learned helplessness. It facilitates a shift from passive anxiety to active engagement. And loneliness gives way to a sense of belonging to the global community and to practical participation in solving worldwide problems. ALLATRA helps people realize the profound value and significance of their own lives. It gives them a practical understanding that they are not merely subjects of survival, but a crucial, meaningful, and integral part of society and of the world as a whole. This is the unique value of ALLATRA. It is not merely a movement. It is a scientifically grounded path to the survival of civilization, where the action of each participant is a building block in the foundation of our common future. I am deeply convinced that ALLATRA is living proof that the unification of people on the basis of knowledge and fundamental human values is not a utopia, but a practical necessity. Yes, the movement's research was truly ahead of its time, and our task is to use this head start as a gift before it is too late. Closing address and call for cooperation, dialogue, and protection. Esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, friends, we have come to a moment of truth. We can continue to ignore the alarming signals, hide behind familiar paradigms, and watch as our world descends into chaos. Or we can demonstrate collective wisdom, courage, and strategic foresight. I urge you to see ALLATRA as an invaluable gift to humanity. Today, we are dealing with a global community of highly motivated, competent citizens who are already selflessly performing functions vital to society. First, they are a unique early warning system. Their research identifies existential risks ahead of time, providing the critical lead necessary to save lives. Second, they are an informal diplomatic platform. Volunteers build dialogue where it has been broken and connect those who must be connected to make decisions. In an era of polarization, such bridges between science, politics, and civil society are invaluable. Third, They are a catalyst for societal resilience. The activities of ALLATRA participants strengthen the fabric of the global community, enhancing our collective ability to withstand future shocks. We continue to spend trillions on armament and on remedying the consequences of disasters, while right beside us operates a unique movement offering concrete, viable solutions. Sadly, its potential remains underestimated. We fail to recognize the magnitude of the value that the ALLATRA initiative already represents, and could represent in the future. That is why my segment today aims to draw your attention to the true nature of this movement. It is essential to take a broader view and recognize both the contribution already made and the possibilities that open before us through deeper engagement. If we do not begin addressing existential challenges now, soon there may be no one left to wage wars or to deal with the consequences of catastrophes that threaten the very existence of life on Earth. The time has come to listen to those who are offering a path to preserving our common future. Therefore, I am convinced that supporting ALLATRA's work today is the most reasonable and profitable investment in crisis prevention. This is not about money, but about cooperation, dialogue, and protection. And I call for active collaboration at all levels, strengthening the voice and status in international structures. The ALLATRA movement has already demonstrated its value through engagement with various institutions. However, its voice needs to be strengthened and officially recognized at the highest platforms. I call for the movement to be granted observer and expert status in key UN bodies and relevant international forums. This will enhance its ability to convey critically important information to the international community directly to decision makers, and will contribute to strengthening the global security ecosystem. Interdisciplinary research. I propose initiating interdisciplinary collaboration at the international level for an in-depth analysis of the scientific data and forecasts presented by ALLATRA researchers. Such collaboration could create the conditions for integrating the most promising developments into international crisis response practice. Protection. I call for safeguarding the participants of the ALLATRA movement from politically motivated persecution. In places where democracy is suppressed and tyranny flourishes, their work to save lives becomes an act of courage that demands our solidarity. To ignore the phenomenon of ALLATRA is to display strategic blindness. To oppose it is to wage war against humanity's very immune system, which is desperately trying to heal itself. The only rational and responsible path forward is cooperation and dialogue. Throughout my life, I have believed in the power of dialogue. Today, I urge you to engage in the most critical dialogue in our history, the dialogue on survival. In the ALLATRA movement, humanity itself is extending a hand to us. Will we answer this call? In today's world, where every word and action matters, I feel a responsibility not to stand on the sidelines. It is my moral duty to join the activities of the ALLATRA movement, a community of caring, rational, and principled people, united by a shared sense of responsibility for the fate of humanity and a commitment to protect it. It is a great honor for me to become an honorary representative of the ALLATRA movement and to help this sincere and timely voice of society's conscience be heard. I am convinced that humanity's future does not depend on how tightly we cling to old, obsolete dogmas, those dry, barren branches on the tree of life that no longer bear fruit. We must instead nurture the young shoots. Our future hinges on how quickly we learn to see, value, and sustain new living sprouts of hope. And ALLATRA International Public Movement is without a doubt one of the most promising among them. The participants of ALLATRA are the vanguard of the global civil society. These are people who do not wait for someone else to take action. They have assumed responsibility for our shared future. And with their professional expertise and personal time, they are building bridges where others are erecting walls. I'm appealing to all thoughtful and responsible people. Do not stand aside when the future of our families, our descendants, and all humanity is at stake. Today, more than ever, we need those ready to act for the common good. The time for passive observation has ended. The era of hoping that someone else will solve our problems is gone forever. Today, the very history of humankind poses a question to us. Will it continue? Or will it cease because of our inaction, heartlessness, and inhumanity? The answer to that question lies in the heart of each one of us. When you possess verified scientific knowledge of an impending threat and see that there is no adequate response at the international level, what does your heart tell you? If it urges you to take the side of humanity's future, then, guided by your sense of responsibility and the means at your disposal, support the movement, this noble initiative that gives hope for a worthy future for our children and grandchildren. We are living in an unprecedented time when each of us, to the best of our abilities, has the chance to contribute to our provided a well-substantiated demonstration of the systemic nature of the crisis, driven by the interplay of geodynamic, climatic, and environmental factors. And today, the existing scientific paradigm is only beginning to approach these very same conclusions. For example, it was only in the 2010s that publications began to appear in the academic community, examining the discharge of nanoplastic and its potential hazards. Meanwhile, ALLATRA scientists had long before drawn attention to these specific properties and raised the issue of possible methods for neutralizing them, with the aim of increasing their environmental and biological safety. A decade of ignoring ALLATRA's research and forecast represents an unprecedented loss of opportunity for preventive action, one that has only deepened the crises we face today. That is why I now call for action, to acknowledge the high relevance and practical applicability of ALLATRA's research, and to create the conditions for its integration into the international scientific discourse. The era of academic rivalry must give way to an era of collaboration in the face of existential threats. I address decision-makers directly, urging them to abandon the practice of suppressing scientific initiatives, and recognize that in today's world, there are intellectual forces capable of moving ahead of entrenched scientific paradigms. The research and solutions proposed by ALLATRA are not a matter of competition, but a tool for the survival of civilization, one that must be supported within both national and international strategies. History will judge us not by our titles, but by our ability to hear those who are ahead of their time. ALLATRA's achievements are not grounds for confrontation, but foundation for the future, one that must be received with gratitude. The future demands from us not only intellect, but also the courage to acknowledge the value of scientific knowledge, even when it comes from an unexpected source. Do not let pride drown out the voice of reason. Such a path endangers all of humanity. Today we truly stand before the most dangerous threat in human history. In this moment I appeal to you to support the course of history so that it continues rather than being cut short by the misuse of power for inaction. Act as creators for the sake of our shared future. We must remember that the future is not predetermined. It is we, through our reason and our hearts, who define it. Sincerely, Sheikh Dr. Rafa Halabi.